everybody, and welcome to the very first episode of Southern Fried Pop Culture. I am one of your hosts, Mandi Kaye.
And I'm Kelly Lee. Each week we're going to talk about our experiences of Southern culture through the lens of stories that are set in the South, feature Southern characters, or are Southern flavored in some way. And we're going to do it while we drink Southern drinks. My cocktail tonight is a whiskey sour. How about you, Mandi?
I am still on this vodka lemonade kick, so that's what I've got tonight.
All right, fantastic.
As we go through each movie on this show, we're going to pull our structure from our amazing theme song, which was written by our friend Jazzy Bentley. So we're going to try to split things up into three different sections. Southern culture in general, our bless your heart or problematic moments, and the things that really tickled us pink. When we decided to start this show, Kelly and I immediately knew that Steel Magnolias was going to be the first movie we watched. It is an absolutely iconic movie set in the South.
Yes. So Steel Magnolias came out in 1989, and it's set in Louisiana. And that's about as detailed as we're going to get. But the description of this movie says, it's a warm and fuzzy celebration of friendship, Southern style. And I'm sorry, y'all, but that is a sorry-ass description for a movie that makes most people cry buckets. I'm just saying. And it's a crying shame that this movie is not available for streaming on Netflix or Hulu.
Well, I own it on DVD, so it was fine.
Me too. Yeah, it was not a problem.
But I will say this is definitely not a warm and fuzzy movie. This is a movie about friendship, and particularly, women in the South being friends. But it's largely about a woman who dies. Or at least a woman dying driving what the rest of the movie is about. So there's not really much warm and fuzzy there. So I'm not really sure where that tagline came from.
No. And I mean, this is a movie about the kind of friendship that comes into your life at such a deep level that it may be deeper than family. And there's warmth there. But this is not a lighthearted movie. So if you haven't seen it yet, you might want to bring a box of tissues.
Yes. I have seen this movie a solid dozen times in my life, and I still cry every time. I watched this movie last night, and I sobbed like a baby. Even though I knew what was coming, I couldn't quote it. I still sobbed like a baby. I can't help it.
Well, it was interesting because I have also seen it about that many times, and I did not cry this time. I got really pissed off this time. So I was angry for the situation in this movie. And I think I've changed a lot as a person. And maybe like Ouiser, I've just become incredibly grumpy. But I didn't cry. It didn't evoke that in me this time. So this is going to be a very interesting discussion.
Okay. Well, Kelly, why don't you tell us about your personal experience with the movie? When did you first watch it, and why is it something that you've continued to come back to?
So I was trying to remember this, so I actually asked my mom if she remembered how old I was the first time I watched this. And she said I was about 13, and we rented it on Betamax, which I just thought was hilarious. And she said that we watched it together and both cried our eyes out. And I think I went back to it because I loved the women in this movie. This was my first Dolly Parton movie. This was my first Julia Roberts movie. I'm pretty sure this was my first Sally Field movie. And I just loved the humor in it. I think the first time I watched it, I was young enough that Julia Roberts' character and situation seemed to be star-crossed and romantic. It does not seem that way to me anymore. But the friendship in it is so real and so solid that that's what I go back to it for. What about you?
I don't remember exactly how old I was when I first watched this movie. I was young enough not to understand what rubbers are. So in that scene where Shelby's upset that, her brothers are going to decorate the wedding getaway car with condoms, they called them rubbers, and I had no idea what that meant. So I was pretty young. And this is a movie that I keep coming back to because it's a romanticized portrayal of the life that I've always wanted. And when I say that, I don't mean, having type 1 diabetes and a kid and dying, not that piece of it, but the friendship that Malin, Ouiser, Truvy, and Clary had, those four women, This is Sex and the City before Sex and the City. This was these four women who are all very different, but they love each other. They are a chosen family. And I have always, always wanted that in my life. And I think I recognized that that was something special, even at a very, very young age. And so I always come back to it. And there are other things that are very romanticized about the South in this, like Shelby's wedding, the giant poofy dress, the church wedding with all of the flowers and the big party. That's something that I've always wanted. And so when I watch this, there's just like a little piece of me that remembers those childhood dreams, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. Yeah. And so I just keep coming back to it, even though I know it's going to rip my heart out every time. Although sometimes I watch it just because I'm really upset and I need to cry, and for whatever reason I can't, then I will put this movie in to help me cry.
I thought that was going to be the case for me, but it wasn't. So,
okay.
Very, very interesting. So what rang true for you in terms of your experience with Southern culture as it was represented in this movie?
So much stuff. It's hard because it's very easy to say that everything in this movie is just a stereotype or a caricature, because it is really, really over the top.
Yeah.
But there's always a little bit of truth in stereotypes. That's kind of where they come from. And so I see a lot of truth in the way Southern culture is portrayed in this, especially considering this is a very small town in the Deep South in the 80s. And that's a very specific set of circumstances that look very different from any Southern culture that we see today almost. And I think that the big one is, Shelby's wedding. Shelby is very much the Southern belle in this movie. She's got a slight rebellious streak, but that's also very, very true of a lot of the small town Southern girls who are very proper that I am familiar with. That's a thing. And she is definitely the kind of person that I wanted to be as a kid. When I was growing up, I looked at her and saw this beautiful Southern, gorgeous woman who got the fairy tale wedding, and I thought that was awesome. I actually used to dream about my wedding being just like that, and that was great. The other really big thing, I think, is understanding that in the South there is still, even now, there's still definitely like a classist system. And Malin was a really good example of that. She dogged on Southern values, in quotes, when she was talking about Jackson's family. And she said,
Jackson comes from a good old Southern family with good old Southern values. Either shoot it, stuff it, or marry it.
And it was very derogatory. She meant it in a terrible way. She was making fun of them. But those are things that are generally what you would associate with the South. But also Malin is a very upstanding, sophisticated Southern woman who is dogging on it. And that's definitely a thing that exists even now. It may not be quite the same level as it was back then, but it's definitely something I've seen in my family. I've seen in neighbors. I've seen that everywhere. What about you? What were the things that stuck out to you about Southern culture?
It's so funny because my experience is almost the exact opposite of yours. So when I have the very unpopular position of not liking Shelby at all, and the big Southern wedding to me looks like chaos, and I never, ever wanted one growing up, and I never did the fantasize about the wedding, wanted to be a bride thing. And like my cousins actually had, even in growing up in the 80s, they had these binders, like these notebooks, and they would put like designs and ideas.
Yes,
and
no, that's
the
thing.
Weddings. I mean, like we were kids. Yeah, and I would look at them like, I'm gonna be over here with my book, y'all. Like, you have fun with that. Like, it was never for me. And when I watch that, I just think, I'm going to skip that wedding, go to the reception, dance with a bunch of people, and have a drink. I am not interested in that at all. But some of the very specific things that ring true for me is the, like, good Southern girls love football and Jesus, not necessarily in that order. I have always found that to be true, and again, not the case for me. But I think that the women here were portrayed as very nosy and prying, like right away when there was a new person.
Who the hell are you?
Nell?
Ouiser, this is my new...
Fine. Now, I know everybody in this town. And I don't recall having seen you before.
Well, I just moved into town not too long ago.
With your family?
No, Ma, I don't have any family to speak
Your
of.
husband?
My husband?
Yes.
Well, that's kind of hard to say. I don't know.
You don't know?
Well, I'm not sure.
You're not sure. I'm intrigued. Are you married or not? These are not difficult questions.
And for me, that has been more the case as someone who moved to the Midwest than in the South. So, like, I think in the South, we're much more hospitable and welcoming first to get to know you, and then we're going to take our time, like, pulling your story out of you over a glass of sweet tea, and we're going to get all the details, but we're going to take our time about it.
Right.
So I think some of that was a little rushed. But some of the very specific things that stuck out to me was like when Malin was trying to get ready for the wedding and her sons put ice cubes, down the back of her shirt.
Delivery man! Someone stop that truck! Stop that! Ah! Don't put ice down my back!
Well, I have a teenage son who does that to me all the time, and I yell that exact same thing. Like,
So what you're saying is
word
you're
for word,
Malin,
don't put ice
basically.
down my back. Like, that's exactly what happens. No, I'm nowhere near as classy as Malin. But like Ouiser, I also had a dog named Rhett, and I had a dog named Tara. And the cuppa recipe is used and well loved in my family. My maternal grandmother wears driving gloves. So like some of the things that, you see in this, like that beautiful tree-lined street, I lived on a street like that. And so some of the visuals in this just really made me homesick, and they rang very, very true.
The other thing that I really wanted to kind of point out was, while it is very stereotypical, I think the writers did a good job of trying to show all of the different facets of Southern culture. And they did that really by giving each of the main characters a personality trait. And in real life, people are more complex than this, and they have layers, and all of them will be in all of the people. But what they did was they gave us, so like Malin, she's the mama hen. She's the one who is going to fight to the death for her kids. She's going to do what needs to get done. And that is something that I think really resonates with Southern culture. And you see it in other Southern movies like The Blind Side.
Okay, well, I might have a little bit of that in me.
Right,
Maybe
right.
a little.
You've got her
Yeah.
daughter Shelby, who is the Southern belle with the rebellious streak. I went to an all-women's college in the South, and one of the things that I can remember the most when I was there was you would see all of the girls from, small Southern towns. They're very proper. They've got their hair back in a ponytail with a bow. They're wearing pearls and pearl earrings and sitting there smoking a cigarette. And this was in college. And so, you could even talk to them about it, and they'll tell you they're doing it to be a little bit rebellious. And that's what you're getting from Shelby. You've got Clary. She is who I call the bless your heart lady. She's the one who will talk to you just as sweet as sugar. And as soon as you turn your back, she's going to talk about you, but she's still going to do it with that sweet, syrupy voice. And sometimes she'll do it to your face. Mm-hmm. You've got Truvy, the one who says there's no such thing as natural beauty. She can't leave the house without her hair and her makeup done. I have to tell you, my great-grandma was like that. My great-aunt was like that. My granny used to be like that, but she's kind of softened as she's gotten older. But it was one of those things where every week they would go get their hair set. And that's what they called it. They would get their hair set. I still don't know what that means. I envision it as being a whole can of hairspray gets used on your hair so it doesn't move for a week.
I think it has something to do with curlers, because my grandmother and great aunts used to do that too.
I know people just like Truvy. And And then we round out kind of I almost want to call it a 5-man band just because there's 5 of them, but we round out our group with Ouiser, who is absolutely your stereotypical grumpy old Southern woman. And they even give her a line about it. She says, she's talking about growing tomatoes and how she has to give them all away because she doesn't want to eat them because she doesn't eat healthy food. And Annelle asks,
Then why do you grow them? Because I'm an old Southern woman and we're supposed to wear funny-looking hats and ugly clothes and grow vegetables in the dirt.
No.
Don't ask me those questions. I don't know why. I don't make the rules.
Yeah, and I love she says, and the only reason anybody's nice to me is because I have more money than God. So it's like she knows her role, and she knows she's allowed to say whatever she wants because her place in that society is set. Like she's reached the age and the financial status that she can say what's on her mind and get away with it.
exactly.
And when we were making our favorite quotes for this, like all of mine came from Ouiser.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, she had some of the best one-liners, I think.
Yeah, she really did.
And let's round out our folks with Annelle. You know, I'm going to separate her from everybody else just a little bit, just because she's the outsider and the newcomer, and she's my least favorite of all the characters. But they kind of gave her 2 different aspects and wrapped them all up together. She is the girl from the wrong side of the tracks. You know, she's staying at the boarding house and she's got a sordid past. But then she becomes that small town religious nut that I think everybody knows somebody who has experienced that in their life. Though they do a nice job of toning her down by the end and having her kind of come around to be more moderate. You know, they really kind of twist those stereotypes with Annelle, I think, almost more than they do with anybody else.
They do, and my annoyance and dislike for her can almost throw me out of this movie, but there are very few characters that I have wanted to bitch slap as much as I wanted to bitch slap her. But in this movie, it would be her and Jackson, and I would line them up side by side, and then it would just be one bitch slap, and I'd hit them both, and then I'd get them both on the way back.
All right.
And it would be awesome.
Okay.
So speaking of things that we would, like to slap, do you want to jump into the bless your heart section of things that we did not like about this movie?
I think you should go first, just because looking at the movie through the lens that you did to prepare for the show, I think you came out of it with a very different perspective than you usually do when you watch this movie. It wasn't just pure nostalgic entertainment for you. And so I think that's a really good jumping off point for this Bless Your Heart section, because you have some really good points, and I still kind of came at it with some of that fuzzy nostalgia. And so I'm really curious to see where we differ on certain things.
Well, it was really interesting because I went into this thinking I was going to love it and I was going to write down all my favorite quotes, and it was just going to be, okay, at the end I'm going to cry and it's going to be great. But I think what has happened is I have spent the last 2 decades as a single mom, and it just changes your perspective on life. And what I sort of saw in this was a group of women who were long-suffering and overworked, trying to manage husbands and sons who were portrayed as selfish and incompetent and uncooperative. And a young woman getting married who basically sacrifices her health in spite of every, medical advice telling her not to make a young man happy who knows better, who refuses to listen because of something that he wants, and it was such a waste, and it was such a selfish waste, and it infuriated me so much that I just couldn't get sad about it because I was too busy being mad. And so all of my grief went to Malin, who had to watch that as a mom, instead of to like this tragic love story that they were trying to set up for Shelby. But then there was also, there's a lot of this sort of treating Shelby like a child and talking to her like a child throughout that always kind of bothered me. Everyone in this movie was white. They had some very bad gay jokes, and I know it was in the 80s, but I mean, come on. And Malin, at the wedding very much tried to express her concern to Jackson, and he completely brushed it off. And I just wanted to push him in the swimming pool that was there. Like, save everybody the trauma to come. And, you know, then we have to have fat shaming in the land of sweet tea and fried food. And then you have Truvy, you know, who keeps trying and killing herself with Spud, and he just does not deserve her. And, you know, it was just this constant, these women going so far above and beyond and giving everything they have and being not appreciated and not enough. And the message that sends just bothers me. And it just seemed like such a waste. So, yeah, I did not react to it the way that I expected to. But I did make one very clear note that, like, Truvy's son, she's yelling at him to take the garbage out. And I'm sorry, y'all. When I tell my son to take the garbage out, he takes the damn garbage out. Like, Truvy do not put up with that shit.
Right.
Like, come on. You know?
That, I was having trouble with that too. Because I was raised, your mama tells you to do something, you do it.
Damn right. So, what about you?
Well, first, I just want to say, I understand where you're coming from on all of those things, and I understand why all of those things are problematic, especially looking at it through the lens of 2017. I think when I watch this movie, I'm still watching it from the lens of 1990, really. When I was 9 years old, or 10 years old, however old. And I was 8 in 1990. I can do math, you guys. You know, when I was 8 or 9 and I watched this movie, I think this movie did resonate with me because it portrayed life in a very familiar way to me. Because what I saw in this movie is what I saw in real life. I saw my mother and my grandmother breaking their backs, and I saw men acting like Spud. And that was just the way life was. So I'm not saying it's right and I'm not saying it's good. I'm just saying that is definitely realistic. And so that's why it didn't end up in the bless your heart section for me.
Right.
The things that did for me are, you know, of course, Shelby in the beginning when she is struggling with whether or not she's even going to get married because she's not supposed to have children, and her setting her worth around her ability to provide children. That's something that really bothered with me. And that's a theme that kind of ran throughout the whole movie, which ultimately ended up in her deciding the only way to have worth is to have this child that could end my life, and ultimately does. That's a thing that really bothered me. And then there were just a couple of things where I really, from a story perspective, I had trouble with suspending my disbelief. Things like Malin being so close to these women but not telling them until the day before she's going in to have kidney surgery. I'm sorry, that's not a thing that's going to happen.
Yeah. I agree with that.
I think I understand why they did it for the drama of it, but that's so far outside of reality, especially when you consider how these women gossip. These women know everything about everybody. You know, even in the beginning, Ouiser is all, I know everybody in this town and I've never seen your face before. You know, they know what's happening. And there's no way that Shelby and Malin are doing a kidney transplant and nobody knows about it. Just not going to happen. Right. And then the scene at the end when Shelby collapses, that scene has always bothered me because if you watch what happens, you know, she's outside with Jack Jr. She picks him up, and that's when she realizes something is wrong. So she goes into the house to immediately call Jackson. When Jackson gets home, the refrigerator door is open. The stove is like boiling over with spaghetti sauce that she was not clearly cooking. She was not in the middle of opening a refrigerator when this happened. And she's outside while Jack Jr.'s inside. And so these things just don't work for me. Every time it sucks me out of the story for like 30 seconds because my brain is constantly going, that's not right. That could not possibly have happened. And it just bothers me.
Yeah. I think I can have a headcanon that she thought, I could be dying, but I really should start dinner first.
Okay, that's fair. I think that's fair.
One of the things that throws me out is, you know, they have this structure in this movie where every scene is kind of on a holiday.
Yeah.
And then they do Annelle's bridal shower on Halloween. And I cannot buy that anybody as religious as she was would have gotten married on Halloween.
Well,
Like, it just throws me out every time.
was her wedding on Halloween or just the bridal shower?
Well, they said this is what you get for getting married on Halloween.
Getting married on Halloween. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, so it was like a monster themed shower, and I was like, that girl ain't getting married on Halloween. That girl is trunk or treating on Halloween. Like, she is not getting married.
Right. Okay, that's fair. I think the other thing that I find problematic in this movie, and it's problematic and realistic, I think, is all of the backbiting and the gossiping and the saying horrible things with a smile on your face with that sickly sweet voice that Olympia Dukakis just mastered.
I'm a little embarrassed. I'm windblown. I've just been to the dedication of the new children's park.
Yeah, how did that go?
Beautifully. Except Janice Van Meter got hit with a baseball. It was fabulous.
Was she hurt?
I doubt it. She got hit in the head. Janice Van Meter's the current mayor's wife. We hate her.
So good. I mean, everything that came out of her mouth, she had that smile. And if you didn't understand the words, you would think she was being so nice.
Mm-hmm.
And she's just not. I mean, sometimes she was, because she was definitely, I mean, she loved people and she was there for her people. But, you know, making fun of the dancing woman at the wedding.
Looks like two pigs fighting under a blanket.
Yeah,
Like,
that
that's
was
just
mean.
mean.
It is just mean.
She was really mean sometimes.
Some of the meanness, though, and I guess it's just because this is the meanness in me. I did laugh when...
As somebody always said, if you can't say anything nice about anybody, come sit by me.
Like, sometimes I'm that girl at the party. I guess, I don't know. But I guess maybe because she didn't only do it behind people's backs, she did have... When there were things that had to be said directly. Like, there was that part at the funeral finally, and she looked over at Annelle, and she's like, Annelle, you have got to lighten up. And I was like, thank God she finally said that to that girl's face. But that syrupy, sweet, bless your heart stuff, it is real and it is problematic, and she was incredibly good at it.
Okay. Are there any other bits that were frustrating enough for you to be in the problematic section?
Yes, I have one more. So one of the most, I think, well-known lines from this movie is when Shelby says,
I would rather have 30 minutes of wonderful than a lifetime of nothing special.
and I have always hated that line. And as a mom, I hate it even more now. Because to devalue an entire lifetime, you know, for this falsely romantic idea of something special that's going to make everything else worthwhile just seems so incredibly wasteful to me. And I just hate that she's willing to literally put her life on the line for that. And the pain that that causes her mother is just, you know, it's tangible. And the look on Sally Field's face, it just breaks my heart.
Sally Field breaks my heart everywhere in this movie.
Oh, I know. She was so good.
She was ridiculously good. And, you know, I think I agree with you on that. I wrote down that quote in my notes, but I didn't, like, quantify it. I didn't put it in a section because it seems like a wonderful thing. You know, it sounds good when you put those words together in that string. It sounds like this wonderful, fluffy, romantical outlook on life. But in reality, it really does devalue life, like you said. In particular, in a situation like we have in Steel Magnolias, where she has already devalued her own life because she feels like she has no worth if she can't provide a child. And to put all of the worth for her life into the few minutes that she knows that she's only likely to have with a child is rude, and it's disrespectful, and it's heartbreaking.
Yes. And I think it comes from, part of it is she's just too young to really understand her own mortality. You know, and I say that as the parent of an 18-year-old because, and I don't remember how old Shelby was, but she wasn't,
Right.
You know, she was young when she got married. And that is the risk and pain of becoming a parent. because then you have to love this being who does not understand their own mortality, and it's terrifying. And so I think that this movie is positioned as, the story of young love and tragedy. And it's really not. It's really the story of old love and what happens when you outlive someone else. Because we have Clary outliving Lloyd, and now we have Malin outliving Shelby. And what happens when that kind of love resonates throughout your life. And that is a whole different kind of pain. But it's not really how the movie is portrayed.
And I think the other thing the movie is doing, and I don't know that it was doing this intentionally because it was 1989. It may just be they did this because that's how it was in 1989. But it is actually a thing where women are supposed to get married and have children. You're raised to believe that. Right. You're raised to believe that. I was raised to believe that. I thought my whole purpose in life was to become a wife and a mother. That was what I wanted more than anything in my life when I was 16 and 17 years old. And I can remember when I was 19, I was at church sitting in the second pew during a sermon on a Wednesday night. And I honestly don't remember what the preacher was talking about, but he called me out as being an old maid because I was 19 and I wasn't married yet. And I internalized
adding to my bitch slap list right now.
I internalized that for many, many years. And I thought I was a failure for being perpetually single. And I mean, so part of me understands why Shelby is the way that she is and why she feels like she's not a good woman if she can't, produce children, because I have experienced that. Now luckily, I am way more enlightened now than I was when I was 19.
Wow.
I'm happily single now and am fine not having kids. But that is a thing that happened to me in the South. And I think it's tough, being a woman, especially of childbearing age.
Yeah, I mean, I understand it because I did them out of order. I had a baby very young and never got married. And I have many, many cousins, many, many cousins. And I'm the only one who's never been married. So, I mean, every family reunion, people are like, Kelly's still single? Kelly's still single. It's just like, it's just one of those things. But, and I don't know, I mean, I know gender roles are a problem everywhere, but I do think they are especially problematic in the South. And, Malin talks about this when Shelby dies, and she talks about all the men having to leave the room because they couldn't take it.
And finally, we realized there was no hope. We turned off the machines. Drum left, he couldn't take it. Jackson left. I find it amusing. Men are supposed to be made out of steel or something.
And honestly, that is as much a disservice to men as it is to women. Because, when you raise men like that, then you're also cutting them off from empathy and from their emotions and from being full people. And on the flip side of that quote, what are women supposed to be made out of? And they never really, they don't answer that.
That's never answered, even in life, honestly. Men, you're always taught that men don't cry because they're so strong. Women are taught that and men are taught that. Or at least they were when we were growing up. I think that is changing, now that we're in 2017. Yes. It hasn't changed quite enough. But that was definitely... traditional gender roles were very, very important when I was growing up and in the town that I lived in, both from a religious perspective and from a Southern perspective. And when you put the two things together, it's really hard to get out of it, especially when those are your formative years.
Yeah, I agree. And I don't think it's doing anyone any favors.
No, it's not. But that's why you do get men are supposed to be made out of steel, because I mean, I totally understand why Malin said that, because that's what she believed. That's what she'd been taught. Right. And, it's not true. People are people. we're made out of flesh and blood, and it's okay to be soft, and it's okay to cry, and it's okay to show emotion. And even at the end, when Malin is giving her phenomenal speech and she's having her breakdown, she keeps trying to stop, to not show emotion. And I think that's something, again, women are also supposed to be strong. Women are supposed to be, I don't know the word that I'm looking for, but they're supposed to be able to handle it and to take care of everybody else, so they shouldn't need to fall apart. And you can see her fighting with that.
Right. Well, you're supposed to be calm and steady at all times. I mean, her daughter died, and she walked out of the hospital room and told Jackson what suit to go pick out for the funeral home, because she had to handle the details. Like, that's how she was, that's how she was raised. She's handling what has to be handled. She's not stopping to handle, how she's actually feeling. Because that's, and that is definitely my experience of women, especially the women that are the matriarchs of Southern families.
Yes. My grandmother was very much like that when my granddaddy died. And I mean, I did stay with her for about a week around that to just help her. But she was on top of everything, and she was trying her hardest to make sure that everybody else was taken care of. And that's why I stayed, so that I could make sure she was taken care of. But she made it hard, because she had it in her mind. I mean, she's in her 80s now, and she's very much a matriarch of a Southern family.
But, I mean, I do struggle with this, too, because I make it difficult to take care of me. Like, for other people to take care of me. It's not, it's not easy if you try to take care of me. Because I'm used to handling everything by myself, and that's just how it is. So, I don't know if that's all from being Southern, but I definitely have it too.
I think it's partly a human thing, but it's, I think, exaggerated in the South. I think a lot of these traits are human traits, but just get overly exaggerated in the South, particularly things like gender roles. Okay, well, that's a lot of really deep, sad talk. So let's move on to the more fun things.
For such a lighthearted, warm and fuzzy movie.
Although I will say the bit that made me cry is in this section for me. So I don't know what that says about me. So Kelly, why don't you tell us the things that you did really like in the movie, the things that tickled you pink?
So I love Truvy and I love Clary with all their faults. And I love Sally Field's acting. And I love Ouiser because she is the embodiment of all of my grumpiness. Shelby's 2 shades of blush and bashful crack me up every time because pink is my signature color. And I don't care how many times I watch a movie, that makes me laugh. And Sally Field's acting, if I haven't said it 5 times already, my God, the expressions on her face and the pain that she is able to communicate is incredible. I love Shelby setting Ouiser up on a date, and Owen Jenkins is adorable. And when Ouiser says, "I'm not as sweet as I used to be," I think that may be my new dating profile. I think that is so funny. And all of my favorite, top favorite quotes ended up coming from Ouiser.
Oh, yeah.
So she said, a bunch of my friends and I would dress up as nuns and go bar hopping. It's like, yes. And she said, "A dirty mind is a terrible thing to waste." And it was funny because I actually thought in my head, I was like, "Hey, Mandi Kaye, graphic?" Because I love that quote so much. But my all-time favorite quote of the movie was when she said, "I saw Drummington at the Piggly Wiggly this morning and I smiled at the son of a bitch. I couldn't help myself."
Which, I have to say, she had some pretty good character development in this movie, because at the beginning of the movie, she said, "I bet he takes the dishes out of the sink before he pees in it."
Yeah. Well, and the ongoing battle with the two of them was so good. And when she walked past him at Shelby's funeral and just kind of tapped him on the arm, that moment of peace between them was beautiful. But I think Malin's anger at the funeral and the friendship of the women, those were the 2 most emotionally true things of the movie for me.
I'm fine. I'm fine. I'm fine. I can jog all the way to Texas and back, but my daughter can't. She never could. Oh, God, I'm so mad I don't know what to do. I want to know why. I want to know why Shelby's life is over. I want to know how that baby will ever know how wonderful his mother was. Will he ever know what she went through for him? Oh, God, I want to know why. Why? Lord, I wish I could understand. No, it's not supposed to happen this way. I'm supposed to go first. I've always been ready to go first. I don't think I can take this. I don't think I can take this. I just want to hit somebody till they feel as bad as I do. I just want to hit something. I want to hit it hard.
Here. Hit this. Go ahead, Malin. Slap her.
Are you crazy?
Hit her.
Are you high, Clary?
Clary, have you lost your mind?
We'll sell T-shirts saying I slapped Ouiser Boudreaux.
But then Clary offering Ouiser up for a slap cracks me up, even though it was mean as hell. And I love how she apologizes to her afterwards, and I love them fighting on the bench like that. They were just adorable. And then at the end, Ouiser and Owen holding hands just melted my heart like butter. So what about you? What tickled you pink?
Okay, first of all, I have seen this movie so many times, and I never once noticed that Shelby's wedding dress was pink. That completely blew my mind when I noticed it. I mean, it's a very, very pale shade of pink, and I think my brain just always assumed it was white because this was one of those big fairy tale Southern weddings, and you wear white. But it's not. It's pink, and I love it. I love it.
Lush and bashful.
Well, I understand that, but those were the wedding colors, you know, the fingernails and the flowers, the ribbon and all that stuff. So I never expected her dress to be anything else because I think when I was that age dreaming about weddings, it never occurred to me that your wedding dress could be anything other than white because that's just what it's supposed to be. And now I think about it, say yes to the dress and you've got black dresses and white dresses and pink dresses and like red dresses and like any color you want, you can get a dress. And so this time when I saw it and I didn't have that filter on, I realized she is wearing a pink dress in 1989. And that's amazing.
Well, she did stand out as a little bit of a rebel to you. And I think that was a little bit of a nod to her argumentative nature.
I do have a hard time believing that Malin would let her do that because Malin is so straightforward, but I imagine they argued about it before Shelby won. So
I would think so.
And I think my favorite Ouiser line is,
I'm not crazy, Malin. I've just been in a very bad mood for 40 years.
Because that is me. Like, I'm pretty sure, I mean, I'm going to be 35 next month, and I'm already Ouiser.
So, thank you for making me feel old, because I am about to turn 40, and I want that quote written out in icing on my birthday cake.
I'm pretty sure you can get that done.
I think I can.
And I think my very, very favorite thing about this movie is the way the relationship between mothers and daughters are portrayed here. The way Sally Field and Julia Roberts show that dynamic, I think, is amazing. You get the reality of the arguments and Shelby pushing back and wanting to be her own person and making her own decisions. And you get Malin being upset and arguing back, but at the end of the day, she loves her daughter and she accepts that. And, you've got that whole exchange where Malin says, I didn't raise my daughter to be like that. And Shelby pushes back and she's like, yes, you did. This is exactly how you raised me to be. And it's wonderful. I love it. And then in the hospital, once Shelby's in her coma, Malin never leaves her side, not once. Jackson leaves, Drum leaves, the brothers leave, and Malin stays the whole time. And, Drum tries to get her to leave, to go get a shower, to actually take a nap, to get some real food. These are all things that I would probably say to someone, or that someone would say to me if I were in that position. And she doesn't leave. She says, what if she wakes up for 2 minutes and I'm not here? And that is the moment the tears started for me.
There's that moment when he's sitting behind her and he's trying to be so kind, rubbing her neck and trying to get her to leave. And she physically elbows him and pushes him away. And I was like, if that was my baby and someone tried to get me to leave that room, I'd have knocked him down too.
Right.
Because mamas don't leave. Like, that's just not how we roll, you know?
And then at the funeral, Sally Field's performance kills me every time. Like, there's enough time between when my tears start and when we get to the funeral that my tears had stopped and I was just kind of okay. And then after the funeral, and Sally Field just does her whole thing, you know, she starts saying, I'm fine, I'm fine, I'm fine. And then she starts screaming. That's when I start sobbing. Like, it just hits and I sob, and she just goes through all of these emotions. Like, why is she the one who's gone? It doesn't make any sense. Why can I run a marathon, but my daughter never could? And just her acting, her emotions, the love that she has for her daughter, and that whole relationship is just one of my very favorite things. And it honestly reminds me a little bit of me and my mom. My mom is my best friend. And she wasn't when I was a kid. You know, when I was 16, absolutely not. You know, I was embarrassed to be around my mom. But now that I'm an adult and my mom is an adult, you know, we have that same kind of relationship. And I think that's part of why I love it so much. And it's just wonderful, even though it makes me cry like a baby. I mean, not even like a baby. It's worse. I mean, I'm talking like heart-wrenching, full-body sobs is what I do when I watch this movie. It kills me. But they do balance it with that moment you were talking about between Clary and Ouiser. You know, Malin is so upset. She's like, oh, I just want to hit something. And Clary grabs Ouiser and says, well, hit this. And it's amazing. Like, everybody starts laughing. I start laughing, and it just kind of breaks that tension and that heartbreak. And I think that is wonderful.
Yeah. Well, like I said, I did not cry this time, but there's that one moment after the funeral when Annelle says, you know, she's pregnant. They'd like to name the baby Shelby. And Malin says, oh, I'm tickled pink. And then she says pink. And I did get a little lump in my throat.
Yeah.
Just in that 1 second, because it was so touching and sweet. And then I wanted to punch Jackson in the face again, so I just got mad.
Jackson, you know, I don't really think about Jackson very much because he's just not really in the movie. To me, he's not even really a character in the movie. And I don't know what that says about relationships in the South, really, for him to not even really be a part of her life. I know it always strikes me as odd when they're in the hospital and it's Malin who never leaves, but it's Jackson who has to sign the papers. And it frustrates me.
I noticed that
just
too.
because it seems so wrong. Like, I understand legally why that's a thing, but I feel like Jackson should have been not leaving too. Like, he shouldn't have left. And so it's always a juxtaposition to me when Malin's the one who's been there for the last 10 minutes of the movie, reading to Shelby and talking to her and doing her leg exercises so her muscles don't atrophy. And then the next shot is Jackson holding the clipboard and having to sign the papers.
I would go a level above that and say maybe Jackson should never have put her in the hospital in the first place. But, you know, that's just, I don't know. It's just this absolute irresponsible, you know, lack of consideration for the damage that he's going to cause this woman, and making decisions based on what he wants and not based on what's best for her, which I think is probably, unfortunately, not only a Southern thing.
Well, let me play devil's advocate for a second.
Okay.
What about the possibility that the reason that he was so on board with them having a child was not because he was putting his wants before her life, but he wanted to make her happy, and this was something she wanted so badly, regardless of why she wanted it. We know she wanted it for him, but he knew this was what she wanted. And so do you think that's a possibility? I mean, we don't really have any textual evidence one way or the other.
I don't think it matters, because if what you want more than anything in the whole wide world is something that will kill you, and I love you, I am not going to let you have that thing.
Okay, that's true.
It's just very simple.
You're right. Absolutely.
Like when my son was 18 months old, his mission in life was to put his finger in the electrical outlet. It was all he wanted. It was everything, all of his motivation, his whole purpose for being was to put his finger in the electrical outlet. That was it. That's all he wanted. That was it. There was no distracting him. I had to move furniture. Like, I almost disconnected my damn electricity. I could not distract this child. Like every baby, safety thing, everything. For like a solid week, this was all this kid wanted. And the look on his face, he would, like, I had absolutely broken his heart. Like, here was his mother, who he loved, who was completely betraying him. And it was just this baffled heartbreak. Like, Mom, how can you possibly keep this wonder from me? Because that was my damn job, And so at some point, if that thing that you want more than anything is going to cost you your life, then the people who love you have to not let you pursue it.
You are absolutely 100% right. And I take it back.
Now, I mean, that's not to say that it's not her choice. If she wanted to have a baby anyway, if she wants to go all Melanie Gone with the Wind, it's her right. But I don't think she wanted it because it was what she wanted. Because she said, I think this baby will help things a lot. And I think that that's what her motivation came from. I would never tell a woman not to have a baby because of the health risk if she really wanted to have a baby. I just don't think that that was the case for Shelby. And I think Jackson was an ass.
I'm not sure we really saw enough of Jackson for him to be an ass. Mostly what we saw was him not talking, just standing around. But yeah, okay.
But when the mother of the woman you're marrying is trying to express concern to you and you're like, it cost me $60 to rent this tux and that's all you got, I just don't have time.
Fair enough.
Sorry.
I'm right there with you.
So, do you have any other thoughts or reactions to this movie that didn't fit in our boxes?
I think this movie is just delightful and I love it regardless of how problematic it is at times because it just makes me smile and it makes me happy. And it reminds me of things that were true in my life when I was growing up. It reminds me of a way of life that was true, even though it's a way of life that is good that doesn't really exist anymore, or at least is on its way out, is not quite so strong. It just it warms my heart to feel nostalgic. I don't know what that does about me, honestly, but I'm really glad that we watched this movie. And that I got to look at it from a perspective other than just, oh, hey, this is a really good movie that's going to make me cry.
And for all of its flaws, I mean, I still love it and I'd watch it again.
Yeah. I will say at the wedding, they had the clogging scene that they film for no good reason. That's out of nowhere. These two characters we've never seen before and they just watched them dancing for a little while. I love that because I always wanted to take clogging lessons when I was a kid and I never got to.
Oh, I actually did. I did a little bit of clogging and a little bit of square dancing, and it was fun. And I think dancing is the best part of weddings. So I love that scene, even though it does not fit, and you can tell they were just professional dancers brought in. I don't care. Yeah, I love it.
Me too. All right, what about you? Anything else that you want to talk about that we haven't really talked about yet?
I think two things that made me laugh is shooting fireworks into a tree with a bow and arrow is absolutely something that the men in my family would do. And Truvy's philosophy on shoe sizes.
Well, in a good shoe, I wear a size 6, but if 7 feels so good, I buy a size 8.
It just cracks me up. But I do love this movie. I mean, I know I've pretty much ripped it to pieces, but I will watch it again. And it's probably a lot of sentimentality and just the friendship between, the women and the strong female leads that we have in this movie, because while I do think that they tolerate too much and that they carry too much, none of these women are pushovers. They are strong women and they're strong actresses and they carry this movie and they do it gracefully.
Even Annelle gets to that point. I mean, she's a little bit of a pushover at first, but once she finds her place, she stands her ground for the things that she believes in and the things that she wants. And they all did that. And it's great. Like I said, it's Sex and the City before Sex and the City. It's great.
Yeah, and I love that because I didn't think of that, so I'm really glad that you pointed that out. Sex in the South?
Maybe.
That would be a very interesting name for a very different kind of podcast.
Yes, definitely. Somebody needs to make that so we can listen to it. But it's not going to be me.
Yes. Somebody does need to make that so we can listen to it. That would be awesome.
Thanks, everybody, for joining us on this very first episode of Southern Fried Pop Culture, and we want to hear from you. If you want to join the conversation on Twitter, use the hashtag SFPop. Tell us about your experiences growing up in the South or how you felt watching this movie. You can find me on Twitter at Mandi Kaye, or you can email us at podcast@eloquentgushing.com.
And you can find me on Twitter at Dr. Kelly Jones, or on the Southern Fried Scholar podcast, or on the Big Strong Yes podcast with Lonnie, Diane Rich. Mandy, what are we going to be watching next?
Next week, we are going to be watching Driving Miss Daisy, which neither of us have seen yet. I don't know how that's quite possible. Well, yes, I do, because I have another show called Pop Culturally Deprived. So this will be fun.
It'll be very interesting. And we also want to give a shout out to Jazzy Bentley for our amazing song and the music for this show. So thank you all for listening and for following along, and we look forward to hearing your thoughts. Thanks, y'all.
Bye.
You wanna hear just what I think, but I don't walk around tickle pink. I've got a lot to say about today's modern art. There's stories and there's counterpoints, and I have got my unique voice. I'm a professor who says bless your little heart.
Southern Fried Pop Culture is an Eloquent Gushing production. For more information, please visit eloquentgushing.com or visit us on Twitter at eloquentgushing.